According to legend, the ruler Ashoka, R273-232 BCE, was stunned by grief and remorse as he looked across the battlefield. As was the custom of his dynasty, he had gone to war, expanding his empire until he had conquered many of the kingdoms that had comprised the Indian subcontinent. Now, about 265 BCE, after the final battle in his conquest of the northern kingdoms, he was suddenly unexpectedly shocked by the horror of the suffering he had caused. In the traditional account, it is said that only one form on the battlefield moved, the stooped figure of a Buddhist monk slowly making his way through the carnage. Watching this spectral figure, Ashoka abruptly turned the moment of triumph into one of renunciation. Decrying violence and warfare, he vowed to become a Chakravartin, world-conquering ruler, not through the force of arms, but through spreading the teachings of the Buddha and establishing Buddhism as the major religion of his realm. Although there is no proof that Ashoka himself converted to Buddhism, he erected and dedicated monuments to the Buddha throughout his empire shrines, monasteries, and the columns commonly called Ashokan pillars. With missionary ardor, he dispatched delegates throughout the Indian subcontinent and to countries as distant as Syria, Egypt, and Greece. In his impassioned propagation of Buddhism, perhaps as a means of securing his enormous empire, Ashoka stimulated an intensely rich period of art. Despite the emissaries he sent and his widespread placement of inscriptions on the face of large rocks, his pillars are few in number and quite concentrated in location. Only 8 can be attributed to Ashoka's time by the inscriptions they bear, although several other pillars are commonly assigned to this period. Most were placed at the site of Buddhist monasteries along a route leading from Punjab in the northwest to Ashoka's capital, Pataliputra, in the northeast. One pillar some distance from this route, at Sanchi, suggests that others, perhaps not yet discovered, may have been placed along a more southerly path. Not only are the pillars the first sculptural remains in India after a hiatus of some 1,600 years, but their inscriptions are the first preserved Indian writing that we can read and interpret. The script, known as Brahmi, was deciphered in 1837 by James Prinsep, a brilliant amateur scholar who served the East India Company as assay master of the Calcutta Mint. He discovered that the inscriptions were written in Prakrit, a language closely related to classical Sanskrit, and that they set down laws of righteous behavior for the monks and nuns resident in the monasteries where the pillars were erected, as well as for passing travelers. Like so many aspects of Indian art, these pillars raise intriguing questions that have yet to be answered. Most notably, how could such pillars be made in the absence of any known precedent? The Indian subcontinent, the South Asian subcontinent, or Indian subcontinent as it is commonly called, is a peninsular region that includes the present-day countries of India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. From the beginning, these areas have been home to societies whose cultures are closely linked and which have maintained remarkable continuity over time. South Asia is distinct from Southeast Asia, which includes Brunei, Myanmar, Cambodia, East Timor, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Although the modern Republic of India is about a third the size of the United States, South Asia as a whole is about 2/3 its size. A low mountain range, the Vindhya Hills, acts as a natural division that separates North India from South India. On the northern border rises the protective barrier of the Himalayas, the world's highest mountains. To the northwest are other mountains through whose passes came invasions and immigrations that profoundly affected the civilization of the subcontinent. Over these passes, too, wound the major trade routes that linked the Indian subcontinent by land to the rest of Asia and to Europe. Surrounded on its remaining sides by oceans since ancient times, the subcontinent has also been connected to the world by maritime trade, and during much of the period under discussion here, it formed part of a coastal trading network that extended from eastern Africa to China. Differences in language, climate, and terrain within India have fostered distinct regional and cultural characteristics and artistic traditions. However, despite such diversity, several overarching traits tend to unite Indian art. Most evident is a distinctive sense of beauty, with voluptuous forms and a profusion of ornament, texture, and color. Visual abundance is considered auspicious, and it reflects a belief in the generosity and favor of the gods. Another characteristic is the pervasive symbolism that enriches all Indian arts with intellectual and emotional layers. Third, and perhaps most important, is an emphasis on capturing the vibrant quality of a world seen as infused with the dynamics of the divine. Gods and humans, ideas and abstractions are given tactile, sensuous forms, radiant with inner spirit. Indus civilization. The earliest civilization of South Asia was nurtured in the lower reaches of the Indus River, in present-day Pakistan and in northwestern India, known as the Indus or Harappan civilization, after Harappa, the first discovered site. It flourished from approximately to 600 to 1900 BCE, or during roughly the same time as the Old Kingdom period of Egypt, the Minoan civilization of the Aegean, and the dynasties of Ur and Babylon in Mesopotamia. Indeed, it is considered, along with Egypt and Mesopotamia, to be one of the world's earliest urban river valley civilizations. It was the chance discovery in the late 19th century of some small seals, such as those in Figure 9.2, that provided the first clue that an ancient civilization had existed in this region. These seals appeared to be related to, but not the same as, seals known from ancient Mesopotamia. Excavations begun in the 1920s and continuing into the present subsequently uncovered a number of major urban areas at points along the lower Indus River, including Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Chanhu-Daro. Mohenjo-Daro. The ancient cities of the Indus Valley resemble each other in design and construction, suggesting a coherent culture. At Mohenjo-Daro, the best preserved of the sites, archaeologists discovered an elevated citadel area about 50 feet high, presumably containing important government structures, surrounded by a wall. Among the buildings is a remarkable water tank, a large watertight pool that may have been a public bath, but could also have had a ritual use. Stretching out below the elevated area was the city, arranged in a grid-like plan with wide avenues and narrow side streets. Its houses, often 2 stories high, were generally built around a central courtyard. Like other Indus Valley cities, Mohenjo-Daro was constructed of fired brick, in contrast to the less durable sun-dried brick used in other cultures of the time. The city included a network of covered drainage, systems that channeled away waste and rainwater. Clearly, the technical and engineering skills of this civilization were highly advanced. At its peak, about 2500 to 2000 BCE, Mohenjo-Daro was approximately 6-7 square miles in size and had a population of about 20,000 $50,000 Indus Valley seals. Although our knowledge of the Indus civilization is limited by the fact that we cannot read its writing, motifs on seals as well as the few artworks that have been discovered strongly suggest continuities with later South Asian cultures. The seal for example, depicts a man in the meditative posture associated in Indian culture with a yogi, one who seeks mental and physical purification and self-control, usually for spiritual purposes. In the persons with elaborate headgear in a row or procession observe a figure, standing in a tree, possibly a goddess and a kneeling worshipper. This scene may offer some insight into the religious or ritual customs of Indus people, whose deities may have been ancient prototypes of later Indian gods and goddesses. Numerous terracotta, figurines, and a few stone and bronze statuettes have been found at Indus sites. They reveal a confident maturity of artistic conception and technique. The terracottas resemble Mesopotamian art in their motifs and rather abstract rendering. On the other hand, the stone figures foreshadow the later Indian artistic tradition in their sensuous naturalism. Priest King from Mohenjo-daro. The identity of the male torso, in sometimes called the priest king, is uncertain, suggesting a structure of society where priests functioned askings for which we have no evidence at all. Several features of this figure, including a low forehead, a broad nose, thick lips, and long slit eyes, are seen on other works from Mohenjo-daro. The man's garment is patterned with a trefoil, three-lobed motif. The depressions of the trefoil pattern were originally filled with red paint, and the eyes were inlaid with colored shell or stone. A narrow band with a circular ornament encircles the upper arm and the head. It falls in back into two long strands and may be an indication of rank. Certainly, with its formal pose and simplified, geometric form, the statue conveys a commanding human presence. Nude torso from Harappa. Although its date is disputed by some, a nude male torso found at Harappa is an example of a contrasting naturalistic style of ancient Indus origins. Less than 4 inches tall, it is one of the most extraordinary portrayals of the human form to survive from any early civilization. In contrast to the more athletic male ideal developed much later in ancient Greece, this sculpture emphasizes the soft texture of the human body and the subtle nuances of muscular form. The abdomen is relaxed in the manner of a yogi able to control his breath. With these characteristics, the Harappa torso forecasts the essential aesthetic attribute. The reasons for the demise of this flourishing civilization are not yet understood. All we know is that between 2000 and 1750, possibly because of climate change, a series of natural disasters and invasions, the cities of the Indus civilization declined, and predominantly rural societies evolved. The Vedic period, about 2000 BCE, nomadic shepherds, the Aryans, entered India from Central Asia and the Russian steppes. Gradually, they supplanted the indigenous populations and introduced the horse and chariot, the Sanskrit language, a hierarchical social order, and religious practices that centered on the propitiation of gods through fire sacrifice. Their sacred writings, known as the Vedas, gave the period its name. The earliest Veda consists of hymns to various Aryan gods, including the divine king Indra. The importance of the fire sacrifice, overseen by a powerful priesthood, the Brahmins, and religiously sanctioned social classes, persisted through the Vedic period. At some point, the class structure became hereditary and immutable, with lasting consequences for Indian society. During the latter part of this period, from about 800 BCE, the Upanishads were composed. These metaphysical texts examined the meanings of the earlier, more cryptic Vedic hymns. They focus on the relationship between the individual soul, or Atman, and the universal soul, or Brahman, as well as on other concepts central to subsequent Indian philosophy. 1. Is the assertion that the material world is illusory, and that only Brahman is real and eternal. Another, holds that our existence is cyclical and that beings are caught in samsara, a relentless cycle of birth, life, death, birth. Believers aspire to attain liberation from samsara and to unite the individual Atman with the eternal, universal Brahman. The latter portion of the Vedic period also saw the flowering of India as epic literature, written in the melodious and complex Sanskrit language. By around 400 BCE, the 18-volume Mahabharata, the longest epic in world literature, and the Ramayana, the most popular and enduring religious epic in India and Southeast Asia, were taking shape. These texts, the cornerstones of Indian literature, relate histories of gods and humans that bring the philosophical ideas of the Vedas to a more accessible and popular level. In this stimulating religious, philosophical, and literary climate, numerous religious communities arose. The most influential teachers of these times were Shakyamuni Buddha and Mahavira. The Buddha, or Enlightened One, lived and taught in India around 500 BCE. His teachings form the basis of the Buddhist religion. Mahavira, c. 599–527 BCE, regarded as the last of 24 highly purified super beings called Pathfinders, Tirthankaras, was the founder of the Jain religion. Both Shakyamuni Buddha and Mahavira espoused some basic Upanishadic tenets, such as the cyclical nature of existence and the need for liberation from the material world. However, they rejected the authority of the Vedas, and with it the legitimacy of the fire sacrifice and the hereditary class structure of Vedic society, with its powerful exclusive priesthood. In contrast, Buddhism and Jainism were open to all. Regardless of social position, Buddhism became a vigorous force in South Asia and provided the impetus for much of the major surviving art created between the 3rd century BCE and the 5th century CE. The Vedic tradition, meanwhile, continued to evolve, emerging later as Hinduism, a loose term that encompasses the many religious forms that resulted from the mingling of Vedic culture with indigenous beliefs. The Maurya period after about 700 BCE, cities again began to reappear on the subcontinent, especially in the north, where numerous kingdoms arose. For most of its subsequent history, India was a shifting mosaic of regional kingdoms. From time to time, however, a particularly powerful dynasty formed an empire. The first of these was the Maurya dynasty, c. 322–185 BCE, which extended its rule over all but the southernmost portion of the subcontinent, female. Figure from Didarganj, The Art of the Maurya Period, reflects an age of heroes. This time emerged the ideal of upholding Dharma, the divinely ordained moral law believed to keep the universe from falling into chaos. This heroic ideal seems fully embodied in a life-size statue found at Didarganj, near the Maurya capital of Pataliputra. The statue, dated by most scholars to the Maurya period, probably represents a yakshi, a spirit associated with the productive forces of nature. With its large breasts and pelvis, the figure embodies the association of female beauty with procreative abundance, bounty, and auspiciousness, qualities that in turn reflect the generosity of the gods and the workings of Dharma in the world. Sculpted from fine-grained sandstone, the statue conveys the Yakshi's authority through the frontal rigor of her pose, the massive volumes of her form, and the strong, linear patterning of her ornaments and dress. Alleviating and counterbalancing this hierarchical formality are her soft, youthful face, the precise definition of prominent features such as the stomach muscles, and the polished sheen of her exposed flesh. This lustrous polish is a special feature of Maurya sculpture.